blobs of doom, clogged nozzles, and resin prints that just don't print well. All this and more. Print Fix Friday, episode 33. Let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back to Print Fix Friday. We're gonna start here with probably the biggest fail of the week, a little bit of Creality Cloud talk. I know we've talked about it a bunch, but I'm going to keep talking about it because it is a ridiculous failure. Then we're gonna move into some of my personal failures that I've had over the past couple of weeks. Actual wet filament, I know. Real wet filament, and I caught the sound on camera. We're then going to move into a ABS failure coming all the way from one of our patrons. We then move into some resin failures from Kiersey Fabrication, one that Chris Catlett showed us from Reddit, as well as a couple of more resin failures from Reddit. Remember, if you want to get your fails looked at by the experts here at 3D Musketeers, you can use the hashtag PrintFix and make sure that you tag us on all the social medias that are listed somewhere here on the screen. But let's talk a little bit about Creality Cloud, because I am really fucking tired of dealing with Creality and the Creality Cloud system. As you saw in our video yesterday, which is a failure because it should have been Wednesday's video, there's a story to it. I'm gonna put it on the Patreon only, but it just gets worse. Last week, we talked about this initial problem of stolen models and Creality Cloud doing nothing. And now they're basically making fun of the people that they're stealing from, where they're quipping jokes, they're showing they're not blocking people. Guess what, Creality? Nobody gives a flying fuck. Stop stealing models. You're bad, and it's making you look bad. And people that have stood beside you are ready, willing, and able to walk away, myself included. While I've never particularly liked your 3D printers, I've never particularly said they're the worst things on the planet. They work. And that's okay. To the point of where even Joel Telling, somebody that I honestly did not expect to get involved in this, and guys, for reference, don't at all the big influencers in this industry. They've got big businesses that rely on support from companies like Creality, and they may not want to get involved just to try to keep things a little bit clean for them. But realize there's a big dilemma that they're dealing with right now. Please leave them alone. If they want to get involved, they will. But Joel Telling himself said, at this point, Creality Cloud is an absolute failure, and any continued operation is Creality advocating theft. And I absolutely 100% agree. I can't believe that with everybody talking about this, that nothing, quite literally next to nothing, is being done. Creality has removed 14 models today. And when Shane and I were talking in yesterday's video, I was looking on Creality Cloud and found tons more models. And God, this problem gets deeper. But we gotta stop this before it gets bad. That's the biggest fail of the week as far as I'm concerned. And I need you guys to help me out. If you haven't seen Thursday's video or last week's video, we'll card to them sequentially so you can take a look at them. Please go watch them. It's important that makers understand the value of intellectual property, okay? I want to know what your thoughts are in the comments below and what you think we can do to make an actual impact on all of this. Because I'm kind of tired of getting pissed off without really having a good means to solve the problems. And I know at this point you're probably tired of me talking about Creality Cloud. And if that's true, well, do something about it. Don't unsubscribe, please don't do that. Say something. And yes, you might not have 10 billion followers. You might have 5, 6, 7, 100, 200, 300. The more people that understand what's going on here and the problems that are going on, the better. And yes, we will unfortunately give some press, and some bad people will find models that they can get for free where otherwise they had to pay. But you know what? I think that's a small price to pay so we can try and get something actually proper done in this community. Anyways, let's get into my fails. There's enough of this. Let's get into my fails. I finally captured wet filament on camera. This is PC ABS, so it's a polycarbonate ABS blend. PC ABS is kind of the worst of both worlds, with the smell of ABS and the warping of polycarbonate, but it is quite resistant to basically everything. and I like it. Except something that I didn't take into account is that polycarbonate is quite hygroscopic, and I knew that for raw polycarbonate, but I just never bothered to put our PCABS into dry bags. Well, that kicks me in the ass on this. So yes, for all of you that are out there dealing with problems, no, you're not alone. This kind of stuff happens even to seasoned amateurs. Sure. Seasoned amateurs. We'll go with that. And I hate when these happen, just like you hate my segues to our sponsor, 3D Musketeers. The pros here at 3D Musketeers understand that failure sucks. I go through it every now and then myself, and we want to help you suck less. Here on PrintFix Friday, we serve to try to help those that, well, we notice. Because yes, while it is difficult for Senpai to notice you, it does happen every now and then. And if you want me to notice you, make sure you use the hashtags PrintFix. We'll make sure to take a look at it and tag us on all the social medias, because I sometimes forget to look at the hashtags. But if you are tired of failing, here at 3D Musketeers, we can help you out. And if you want to kick us a couple of bucks to the creator fund every month, you can do so. Patreon.com/3D Musketeers. And oh yeah, while you're at it, don't forget to leave a like and get subscribed. Let me show you guys what the part looks like, and then we'll go to the video so you can hear it. But this is the actual part itself here. Might be a little bit hard to see here, but ultimately, the part is covered in little blobs. Now, I've done my best to clean them off because I still plan on using this. It's still quite a strong part, but it is from wet filament. Let's listen in. Tell me if you can hear down in those comments. Snap, crackle, pops. No, I'm not queuing up a record. This is actually what wet filament sounds like when it's printing. So what's happening here? We have water ingress into the filament. This has just been caused by exposure to ambient moisture. We also have not had air conditioning for 3 weeks. Thankfully, we finally have it. Nothing a few $1,000s doesn't fix. It got wet, and I don't know if it's been wet or it got wet because we haven't had air conditioning. Not really gonna go after that, but it is Florida, so it's probably just ambient moisture combined with the fact there hasn't been airflow in a while. And it causes the filament to absorb that water. And when that water goes into a hot end, that is well over 100 degrees centigrade. You're over 200 degrees centigrade. In fact, you're almost at 300 for PCABS. I think it prints somewhere in the 275, 280 range. You will instantly boil it. And that creates bubbles and pops, that Rice Krispie sound that you hear. A little bit of 3D printing. ASMR. And this sucks, but there's actually a pretty easy way of dealing with it. You dry your filament. I have used and have one of the kind of cheapy Sunlu dry boxes. It's actually right there. It actually works pretty well. My only complaint with it is that it doesn't really vent out the wet air. So I just undo one of the little plugs in it to let that wet air, that moisture come out. And it seems to dry a 500-gram spool of PCABS in about 6 hours at 55°C. So I'm pretty happy with that. And then I did go ahead and put them into vacuum bags. It's great. You know, that does solve the problem. But hilariously, for this particular part, it's not pretty, but well, neither am I, and I still work just fine. Wet filament is going to produce somewhat ugly prints, right? You're going to get little air pockets and all that. It's a freaking fan duct. I don't care. We're still going to run it. Hilariously, they still ended up failing. The Mark III fan duct is kind of a tough print. It does have built-in support material, but it's got these pillars right here and here. And those pillars are used to actually deal with airflow. But when you're printing in a material like a PCABS, especially one that's wet, those had a tendency to fall over. So I think we printed 8 fan ducts total, and I think I have maybe 3 or 4 that actually succeeded. But that's okay. I only really needed 1, and ultimately, I actually didn't even end up needing it. My mistake here was that we did not keep this filament dry. It's an easy solution to deal with. This is wet filament. You can see it also gets really stringy, and the extrusion isn't all that clean. Nah, dry your filament. I mean, realistically, those dry boxes are pretty cheap. I think those Gen 1s you can get for like 20 bucks or less if you look hard enough. And the newer ones are in the $50 range. I'd love to try them out. Let me know if you guys want us to take a look at drying solutions, both commercial and DIY. Moving on, we've got a submission from our Discord. This comes from one of our patrons, Jacob. Thanks for your support, dude. I appreciate it. He sends over this print, pretty bad warp, and my first gut reaction, is that ABS? Yes, indeed, it is actually ABS. This is Atomic Filaments Orange ABS. First off, love Atomic, great company. Hate ABS, terrible material. So we can see he's got warps, and a lot of them, and some cooling issues. So Jacob, and we've talked about this, we actually have an entire conversation here where you can see we're going back and forth, diagnosing the issues, talking about it. And that's the benefit of being in our Discord, is that you guys can talk to me directly, but it is through the Patreon at the $10 tier or higher. But Jacob here is dealing with some warping. He's got a Wham Bam Hotbox, which is awesome. Use code Musketeers for 10% off through the end of May. That's coming up, so, you know, get in those orders. But even then, it wasn't enough. The issue that he's dealing with is that this part is almost the full build volume of his printer. And when you have print heads or print beds, especially on Cartesians, moving around, even if your chamber temperature is up in the 40 or 50 degrees centigrade range, it's still going to be too cold, right? As the part moves, you've got a convection issue, right? It's cooling down just by the fact that it's moving. He's making parts for a Voron build, which is cool. I'm excited for that. We can see that, you know, doesn't look great. And so I said, all right, as we say, if you like it, then you should put a brim on it. He put a brim on it, and it pulled away from the mag sheet. This is something to bear in mind. If you are using a magnetic flex plate and you are printing a large ABS part, it is absolutely beneficial to go ahead and put clips along the bed so you don't actually pull this up. He said props to Wham Bam though, because the part did not separate from the flex plate. The flex plate separated from the printer. So that kind of stuff happens. Another thing to note here, it appears he has auto leveling built into the printer, but he's still using the bed springs. It would be better to go ahead and hard mount the bed. That way you're not really dealing with too much variance from one print to the other with your bed leveling itself. This sucks. I think he's just gonna send it. I'm pretty certain he was gonna send it. That's the thing with brims and ABS. You're going to grossly modify how much surface contact that you're dealing with. This part itself does not have a ton of surface contact, and that's okay. It doesn't need to have a ton, but with ABS, you absolutely want it to. He said there is a version of this where it is cut up in pieces. I said that is absolutely the right way to do it, but he said he's got a bunch of time. The rest of the parts don't come until Monday, so he's got the better part of 3 or 4 days to mess around and get the settings right. And I happen to like that attitude. He could just say, screw this, I'm just gonna use the other one, but he'd rather go ahead and chase a solution to the problem rather than deal with the actual failure itself and get upset about it. I like when people do things like that. But yeah, I have to laugh because the magnet itself pulled away from the aluminum plate. And if you guys are wanting to learn more about Wham Bam and the things that they do, we actually interviewed Peter Solomon on the most popular episode of the podcast we've ever had. Over 2,000 views on that one, which is crazy for a multi-hour long video. We'll card to that so you guys can take a look at it. But yeah, pretty standard. If you're gonna be printing big parts like that, put your bed clips back on just to be safe. And if you don't have bed clips, you could use tape, I guess. He didn't have any bed clips. I might make some out of like some M3 nuts and bolts to try to just hold the edge and tighten it down. There are so many jank ways that you could do it to make it work. It won't be pretty, but if the print succeeds, doesn't matter. But we are still seeing some convection issues, and with a print this big on a Cartesian printer, it's gonna be a pain in the ass no matter how you deal with it. So from my buddies, Kiersey Fabrications, print failures happen. Maybe we don't share these enough. These two are separate failures from today while trying to find just the right orientation and supports. I asked the question, I said, I'd be looking to add more supports or even make sure your exposure is right. And does he have an air hole? And did you run it through UV Tools? Had no idea what UV Tools is. And for those that don't know what UV Tools is, I will card to that video as well. It is quite literally the cheat code for resin 3D printing. We're going to do a deep dive on that, so make sure you get subscribed if you do want to enjoy a little bit deeper into UV Tools. I tell you, literally, I used it earlier today, and I think the last time I've used UV Tools was a couple of days ago, and it's updated considerably. It's insane how often UV Tools updates, but whatever. That's great. It means there's great community support here. This is one of those cases of, I think you needed a lot more supports than you got. Definitely need more supports. Oh, it didn't stick to the build plate well. And even further, I think there's a suction cup here. Because the part rips away from the supports, that doesn't necessarily mean that your supports aren't strong enough. It means that they're not strong enough to overcome the suction force from the FEP. And if you are actually making a suction cup where you have no opening at the top of the part, or that would be the bottom of the part that the support touches, then you're going to trap air and resin and create a vacuum when you go to pull the part off the FEP. It's why printers like the SL1S and the Formlabs line of printers have the ability to run faster layer times, because they tilt the bed, and suction cups are less of a problem when you're tilting the bed because you're not having to rip it off the FEP. It is slowly coming off the FEP as the bed itself tips down. That's a great point of measure here. This is not one of those printers. This looks like a Photon Mono X. Not 100% sure, but it looks like a Photon Mono X. But yeah, you gotta make sure you've got air holes in there. And the nice thing is, this is what I love about UV Tools. Quite literally, a part that I'm dealing with has suction cups in it. Now, this one here, it's not that big, and there's a lot of other parts here, a lot of other surface area that should accommodate everything, so I'm not too worried about it. This other one, though, it might be okay. And it'll actually tell you where those suction cups are. It also tells you there are suction cups on these fancy rafts. This is a raft that is only available in Lychee Slicer Pro. Also, assuming everything goes well, we are going to have the Lychee Slicer team on our podcast tomorrow. So make sure you guys show up for that 2 p.m. Eastern. I think that's like 1900 hours for them over in France. But I am really excited to talk to them all about this slicer, because without Lychee Slicer, I don't think I'd be doing a lot of resin printing these days. But yeah, UV Tools will find these suction cups, and you can actually tell UV Tools to fix it. And what it will do is it will basically drill a hole into your part that is maybe 10 to 20 pixels in diameter. And then you go back with a little bit of raw resin, you clear it up with, I use like a toothpick or a blunt tip needle syringe, and you cure it right there. So it cures it nice and smooth with the edge, and then the hole's filled, you got nothing to worry about. It's the value of UV Tools. Quite literally, there were quite a few other areas where we had unsupported islands. I just clicked fix, and it fixed it all for me. UV Tools is amazing. Seriously, it's amazing. You gotta make sure that you deal with the suction failures. If you don't take care of that, you're gonna have a bad time. Another one from my buddy, Chris Catlett. Thank you, Chris, for being awesome. You should be a member of our Discord. I think I'm gonna DM you. I want you in the Discord. You don't support us on Patreon, but that's fine. You support us in helping me with the videos. I appreciate that. We got Sonic here. I think this is a Chaos Cortec Sonic with some problems. It's pretty easy for me to tell you what's going on. You have nowhere near enough supports. Quite frankly, I'm surprised it looks this good. This entire section here is held on with 1, maybe 2 or 3 pieces of support. Same deal here, maybe 2 pieces. This has got a little bit more, but I'm also seeing that the tips are penetrating a little deeper than I think. You're also, I think this is using Prusa Slicer. Maybe it's Lychee. But yeah, this is just a lack of support material. When you see really fine tips like this, you want to go in there and add a few more bits of support if the slicer doesn't already do it for you. We did talk about making manual supports. We'll card to that video so you guys can take a look at it, because I do believe in certain cases that manual will beat automatic, but there are just some times where I cannot be bothered to go through all of the effort to make the manual supports. And I have to agree with my boy Nick Tesla here. It's really barely connected, and that's gonna suck. It's going to create a problem. Ooh, we have some videos on supporting from C Catlett. Boy, I wonder who that is. Is this my channel? Oh, he made his own thing about supporting and we're in it. Well, that's pretty smart. Good on you, Chris. Appreciate that. Ah, okay, I should note the file name on the printer was colored red. No other files were. I did a shadow file in between and it came out fine. So what this is, when the file name is red or the file itself is red, that means the file is not manifold. So there might be something wrong with this where it's got an open edge, it's not watertight, whatever it may be. It's a file problem. And there are ways to fix this. Prusa Slicer can fix it, Lychee Slicer can fix it, or you can do it manually in programs like Mesh Mixer. There are ways to fix this. But a lot of times the little problems might not result in anything that is meaningful. So some people just don't worry about it. We got a person saying printers skipping some layers, details, and comments. Just purchased an Elegoo Mars 3 at my job last week, and the first few prints were going great. But now I started randomly skipping layers. I'll post an image for context in the comments. Don't know why or how to fix it. Can anyone help? To give context, we started printing one thing at a time, but then switched to printing multiple at a time. Those prints seem to give the printer a hard time. We've also had resin stick to the bottom during prints and had to remove it from the bottom of the vat of resin. I figured the cause may have been because the supports were too small, so I increased the width of the supports. Let me know what to do to fix it. Thanks. Printer resin is Elegoo brand. Resin purchased off of Amazon. The program he uses is Cheeto Box. Stop it. Go use Lychee Slicer. It does support the Mars 3 now. We've got some recommendations here. Let's take a look at these and see if they're on brand here. The model should probably be hollowed out. I don't think so. The big split, I don't think it's got anything to do with hollowing. There's not enough supports. I would agree that I don't think there's not enough supports, or the resin is cold. Maybe, right? Temperature fluctuations can really plague resin. Resin likes to be warm, and we're actually working on a product to kind of solve those problems. Make sure you get subscribed if you want to see how we're going to deal with 62 square millimeters of space and be able to do the things that I think, well, I know, I'm just testing it, that we can do. But we're kind of nearing the springtime, right? Where it's not really snowing too much up north. I say that as some parts of Northern America here got snow today. But it should be okay, especially if you're inside. A great way to do it, like they say, they warm the resin up by placing a bottle in warm water for 30 minutes before the print and keep the printer warm with a chamber made of foam core and tape. Probably a little too much, and then they keep 2 hot water bottles in the chamber beside the printer, and it makes a huge difference to the quality of the prints. Cheap but effective. I can't hate on the cheap but effective. That's, you know, what I try to do here. And I can certainly appreciate that kind of advice. Some things that I got to say here, I would like them to look through. I definitely don't think we have enough supports, but when you're printing resin models, you don't want all of that material stuck to the base. You want the thing to be tilted in a way that would enable maybe the head of the horse not to have any supports, maybe the swords not have any supports. That would benefit the quality of the print that you're doing. Something printed like this is honestly a lot of extra work for the printer that I don't think matters all of that much. If you tilt it back, you do reduce that cross-sectional area. This part does not appear to be too large. I'm guessing this is maybe a 40 to 50 millimeter tall mini, so it's not using that much resin. I'm not too worried about the amount of resin used. What I am worried about is that literally all the supports stopped and the part tore off of itself. I don't know what's going on here. I'd like them to reorient the part. That would kind of take away the cross-sectional area problem, as well as potentially the hollowing issue that the person discussed. But yeah, that one's a little bit of a tough one. Go to Lychee Slicer first. I think that Lychee's a better option, especially for beginners in resin printing. If you do want to go to Cheeto, that's fine, but honestly, it's more work than it's worth. Lychee Slicer is the way to go, and they do not pay me to say that. Okay, we do have a free pro account with Lychee Slicer, but they only gave that to us after they saw the first video that we made. So I never asked for it. It's just something that I will gladly utilize because it is a software worth purchasing and supporting the awesome development team over at Mango 3D. So what can you do here? This one is not as straightforward because there are quite a few potential problems. I'd like to see others to see if they all failed at the same area. If they're all failing consistently at the same area, we might have a screen problem, which would potentially result in the supports failing in the way that they did. But I'm worried because I don't see the rest of the support material, which means it's likely still in the vat. So make sure that you clean your vat. If you have bits of cured resin floating around in your raw resin and you go to home the printer, it's likely going to smash that into the screen, causing what we're about to see, some screen problems. But yeah, a couple little things. I think we can get through this one. Hilariously, when we talked about resin printer failures and maintenance and all that, where I tried to show the printer with dead pixels and it didn't have dead pixels anymore, I was confused. Thankfully, we've got this wonderful post from somebody on Reddit that has an OG Mars, right? A Mars screen OG Mars. And they're showing some of the dead pixels. We can actually see the pockets of dead pixels here. And this creates basically holes in your model. It doesn't really show that all that well, but you can get an idea of how it just kind of runs holes up through the model. It's crazy weird. When this happens, your only course of action is to replace the screen. Make sure you replace the screen with the right type of screen. On the OG Marses, apparently you can replace them with mono screens. I think you have to update a little bit of the firmware, but otherwise they work totally fine. But make sure you're replacing it with the same screen or a known functioning upgrade. You don't want to try this for the first time with a screen that you've never used and can't validate. That only adds extra problems to the scenario here. This one's pretty easy. This can happen for a few different reasons, right? If you are dealing with bits of cured resin inside of your vat and you home your printer, you're smashing those into, specifically monochromatic screens are pretty fragile. The regular LCD screens have a piece of glass on them, so they're way easier to deal with, but the mono screens are considerably more fragile, so they have a tendency to break more often if you drop things or something like that, where the LCD screens are considerably more robust. However, the LCD screens wear faster than mono screens, so something to note as well. But yeah, this one's a pretty simple one. We will be doing a video at some point on replacing the screens. But yeah, guys, that's all I have for you today. Let me know down in those comments what you think of these fails. Stay safe out there. Don't forget to call your loved ones. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, keep making awesome. Have a good one. Hey, thanks so much for watching this video, and a massive thank you goes out to all of our Patreon and YouTube channel member supporters. If you want to support us and get your name scrolling next to me in these credits, you can do so by clicking the links down in that description and joining our Patreon for $5 a month or more. If you are looking for something else to watch, you can check out the entire PrintFixFriday series right below me. And right next to that will be the printer maintenance series, so you can get those printers fixed. I will see you guys down in those comments and in the next one. Take care.